The virtual America's Food and Beverage Show. The final session for today is entitled Digital Technologies in the Food and Beverage Industry, which will touch on topics on reducing the digital divide, food e-commerce, and blockchain. Today, our presenter is Doug Baker, Vice President for Industry Relations for the Food Marketing Institute. Doug is in the food retail industry relations vice president for the Food Marketing Institute, where he facilitates professional, non-competitive collaboration among members, communities across private brands, technology, and grocery resilience issues areas. In addition to his facilitation on Private Brand Leadership Council and their efficiency-driven initiatives to encourage brand owner innovation, Doug also oversees FMI's CIO Council, Council of Industry Collaboration Council, and Joint Industry Initiative, called Smart Label. So Doug, without any further ado, would you take it over?
Thank you, Ivan. And hello, everybody. Really appreciate you having me today. Look forward to having a quick conversation. I'll do what I can to get through these slides so I don't get the hook there in 30 minutes. But as Ivan mentioned, I've had the pleasure to work in the food industry for now 35 years. I was just adding it up again today. And boy, time has gone by fast, but it's been anywhere from retail operations to food manufacturing to private brand marketing. And for the last 6 years, supporting the industry through the work that FMI does. And so for me at this time in my career, it's a real pleasure to be able to spend time with you folks and pass along some of the things that I'm seeing and learning. And I would say in those last 6 years, I've probably seen as much innovation through technology as we've probably seen in the last 20 previous. For those of you who are not completely clear on who FMI is, we're a food industry association that works across our members and the value chain from single store operators to multi-state and multinational retailers, wholesalers, to the producers who supply them, as well as a wide variety of companies that are critical in supporting each and working collectively to ensure that we have a safer, healthier, and more efficient consumer food supply. For some of you, you might be aware of SQFI, the Safe Quality Food Institute. FMI also owns that and is one of multiple schemes that are used for food safety across the globe. In order to go look forward, I wanted to take a minute and look backwards, and we've really come a long ways. In large part, though, technology innovation in food retail was slow, with marginal step changes along the way. And if you think about digital e-commerce, we're sort of one of the last to the party. So if you see here on this slide, the first scanner was introduced in 1974, right? And it wasn't until 1989 did we then actually see any kind of digital commerce come into play with the first online e-commerce platform, which was known as Peapod and owned now by Ahold Delhaize. But really, the advancements didn't take effect and didn't really take off until we started seeing advancements in communications and computing. And that's really what truly sped up and changed the way consumers engage with businesses, whether it be food or otherwise. Point in case, with the pace of change in the industry, the way we price, sell, and in some cases negotiate has remained fragmented depending on where and whom you're conducting business with. Haggling up there in the left-hand corner, it's still a practice today, and for some, it's more like a sport than a necessity, right? They look forward to haggling, if you're going to go buy a car or otherwise. Even though we're moving further and further away from it, it is still used, and each one of these forms of pricing actually is still used depending on where you're at. It wasn't until 1846 when A.T. Stewart established the first one price system. So an organization that said, we're going to put one price on it. We're not going to haggle anymore. And it was, the first one to establish fixed prices for all of his goods, and also paving the way for, which was later introduced, not until 1861, which was the price tag. a paper price tag introduced by John Wanamaker. In 1891, Frederick Connell patented the pin ticketing machine. And he did that because there was continued errors, right? We're writing stuff out either on price tags or on the package. And it was hard to read. So, I can't read your writing, you can't read mine. So he created this pin ticketing machine that's automated it, and it actually was the first use of ink. And then in 1972, that actually company became Monarch, which we all know today. And they introduced the Model 110 plastic handheld labeler. Now, I was in the industry a little bit past that, but it was in wide use. It was all the rage. And I just remember that those things were like gold. When you got on the clock and you got to the store, you wanted one of those pricing guns because you didn't want to have to run all over the store looking for one. And so if you think about it, from 1891 to 1972, how far Frederick Connell came, in late 40s, early 50s, it was before we actually started doing any other kind of pricing with the price stamper you see there. And in 1952, Edward Garvey received the patent for the ink pad. So as the numbers rolled over that ink pad, they would automatically ink them. Otherwise, you were having to do that manually beforehand. So if you think about it, the Universal Product Code, which was introduced in 1974, is really the first real digital sales, digital transformation that an entire industry adopted. Everybody uses it. And it's really the first time. And it's really sort of been the last time that we've seen any kind of significant digital innovation sort of sweep across an industry. And that was happening about the same time that the iPhone was being introduced in 2007. We had the first look at ESL. So if you see the price tags there, the first iteration of a digital price tag was called an electronic shelf label. And that was coming out around 2007 when the iPhone was. And then just in the last 5 years, 6 years, Microsoft started developing digital shelving, and Kroger, rolled that out into a number of stores, but we really haven't seen significant adoption that has come across since then. The transformation of food has never been more accelerated than what we've witnessed in the last 10 years. And due to COVID, it has accelerated once again. We have an annual research. It's called the Food Industry Speaks Research, and it provides a look at how things were already coming into place a year ago. So in 2019, some 72% of retailers were experimenting with new technologies to improve the customer experience and their efficiencies, their business operations. That percentage in 2020 went from 72 to 83. Now, you can say a lot of that was driven because of the environment that we've been experiencing for 2020 and the need for technology to address many of those things. Some other areas of innovation, though, maybe a little bit less technologically driven, are in ghost kitchens, as an example. Food preparation facilities with no dining. 6% of retailers currently using that, and 10% say they're planning to start using that. And then, of course, micro-fulfillment. We talk about e-commerce. Every discussion we have is about e-commerce because that's where a lot of the public went to. Well, micro-fulfillment has become out as a strong solution to support that e-commerce in an automated technological way. And that obviously was because of the unprecedented increases of consumer shopping. Today, though, 5% of retailers are actually using micro-fulfillment for e-commerce, but 10% are planning. So again, adoption isn't a groundswell, but it is growing. And robotics, which are really fascinating, we all love to see in action and talk about, and it's received a lot of industry buzz, as well as dark stores, which is sort of like that step change from going to having in-store shopping for e-commerce to automated shopping for e-commerce as a dark store. Those initiatives have relatively low adoption. We have seen some retailers that have taken some of their existing stores and gone to dark. And basically what that means is they shut it down to the public. They remove pallets, they remove any obstacles that are in the store to allow for free movement of the pickers for those e-commerce things. So it looks just like a store. They might even change the way they pack out their shelves, not taking product out of cases, but case cutting them and just getting them up on the shelf, because it doesn't necessarily have to look pretty anymore. It just needs to be efficient. And food retail has also experienced a number of digital and technologically related advances, and some in a very short period of time. One exciting area of focus that are emerging are those emerging technologies that are creating both efficiency in their operations, but also ultimately consumer engagement, right? We need to delight the consumer, whether they're online or in store. So artificial intelligence has gotten a lot of buzz, and as an example, which has a broad application from robotics to waste reduction to voice assistance to forecasting, AI is really starting to permeate throughout, and it's gaining adoption with retailers. And actually, there's about a quarter of retailers today that are using artificial intelligence in at least one of those applications that they employ. Equally, advanced data analytics has already plays a major role in food retail, with more than 80% of retailers using advanced analytics, such as for pricing and promotion or assortment, planning and replenishment, load demand smoothing, route availability, right? So there's analytics is really sort of the backbone. And here in the US, with FDA releasing its Smarter Food Safety Blueprint and recently proposed food traceability rule, is highlighting the importance that blockchain or distributed ledgers will play, modernizing the way the industry tracks food through the supply chain, and then also handles food recalls, right? They're somewhat manual. They take a little bit of time to identify. Sometimes they sort of, they have unintended consequences and collateral damage. And the hope is that blockchain and these electronic distributed ledgers will help us to pinpoint the issues and not negatively impact an entire industry. But I'd also like to shed a little light on what's been happening in the US food arena since the early 90s, and then again as a result of COVID. Where and how consumers shop for food has seen a dramatic shift in the US. As you can see here on this chart, starting in 92, the gap continued to close, right? And then in 2018 and 2019, we saw it actually cross over, where consumers were spending more away from home, food away from home, than they were on food for home. And the public has become very diverse pre-COVID as to how they decide and what they want to eat and who they want to buy it from. But the pandemic, as you can see here, that quickly changed, driving many consumers back to the stores as restaurants were asked to shut down or reduce service, companies moved to telework, and academic institutions moved to remote learning. This quickly placed additional pressure on the food retailer and its manufacturing partners. And one of the things that we experienced because of this was a loss of employment on the food service side. So going back to the artificial intelligence use cases, FMI quickly partnered up with a company called Eightfold AI, and they had a platform that's almost sort of like matchmaking. Think about the dating apps. And what it did is it allowed companies and people to enter into that platform. And then on the other end, the recruiting side, the retailer side, they would put in key skills and attributes of what they were looking for. And it would create matchmaking activities, helping those individuals that might have been furloughed or put out of work to find work, which was much needed labor as we were seeing increases in sales. And at one point, I know we had over 800,000 individual people that were in that platform. So a real interesting use case for artificial intelligence. And I mentioned that, shopping went through the roof with COVID, but we were growing prior to COVID. Prior to COVID-19, 34% of shoppers were shopping online and 28% were shopping online only retailers. So a significant increase from 2015. And when you think online only, think of like Chewy and Box.com, those folks that don't also have a brick and mortar environment. But as a result of COVID-19, online shopping quickly became a preferred method, as 50% of shoppers now stated they were shopping online. And more importantly, I think, is 12% of those were, for the first time, they were buying perishable products. And if you think about that, when we were doing research prior to COVID, some of the hurdles to getting somebody to want to try online shopping was because they didn't trust that somebody could pick out their perishable items. I'm one of them. Longtime grocer, I'm the only person who knows how to pick out that cantaloupe, that avocado that I need for guacamole, or the best cut of meat. But because of COVID and consumers' desire not to even go into a grocery store, they were having to overcome those concerns. And, depending on who you talk to, mixed results. But I think the big thing to take away is that they now understand it. And they also understand that they did it in a very difficult time. When inventories were tight, inventory was moving very quickly. So I don't know anybody that could have found a ripe avocado during the pantry loading days of the pandemic. And we have a number of members around the world. And one of the things that we were doing was pulling them together on the phone and learning from them. So we have a member that is based in Wuhan, China, and another one that does business in multiple states. And it was interesting to hear some of the stories. One retailer told us that they had done more e-commerce orders in 1 hour than they typically received in 11 days. So that just tells you what a retailer was experiencing during that time. And it's important to understand that, because it also tells you what we ultimately need to do from a technology standpoint to improve e-commerce performance and the e-commerce experience for the consumer. Some other key metrics, though, that stood out from our research here, as you can see, we have a U.S. grocery shopper trends, and it's typically an annual report, and we were doing it every other week for COVID. But some of those other metrics included almost half of consumers stated they're shopping fewer stores. So what was happening prior to is that, you'd go to 4 or 5 stores to do your shopping. Well, that immediately changed. They were going less distance. So they were going to stores that were closer to them that they might have passed in previously, but they were also going to fewer stores to get their shop. And then additionally, omni shoppers now are spending on average of $134 per week per spend per household, which is about a 10% increase higher than what was reported in February before the pandemic really took hold. So this reflects a pretty dramatic shift towards food retail away from traditional food service, and what a retailer is going to have to think about as they continue to run through those technology tests and pilots in order to be able to improve their operations. Also, as consumers were increasing usage of e-commerce, they were also increasing how much of their total food spend was being done online. So we never had a complete 100% flip. We went from food service to retail, but within retail, they were still dividing their dollars up. And as you can see here in this chart, in 2019, about 10.5% of a consumer's total food bill was online. In March and April of 2020, that went to almost 28%. So up significantly, but not complete. So that's important because, at the end of the day, we talk about the demise of retail, brick and mortar retail. It's not going to happen. We can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But what the consumer's telling us is they expect the same kind of efficiencies and experiences in the store as they receive online. and what they see online as far as food products and food information, the digital must equal the physical. So it needs to be very consistent. In hindsight, though, it's interesting how food retailers described their e-commerce sophistication a year ago in the FMI Retailing Speaks research report versus where they're at today. So, and it was a little bit of a surprise. Online sales in 2019 represented on average 2.5% to 3% of a store's total sales. So not a lot, but growing and important. But that was markedly up from an average of 1.4% in 2018. So quickly growing. Only 4% of responding retailers with online sales considered themselves to be very sophisticated and selling into this consumer and marketing products in an online environment. And slightly over half of those retailers that responded described their organizations as somewhat sophisticated, and then a third said not very. So jump ahead to 2020, and sophistication might not have been the most important factor during early months of the pandemic. Probably more crucial was the ability to ramp up capabilities quickly. Retailers had to get ready for prime time as the pandemic hit. And so that's when you started seeing, an increase of third-party companies to do in-store shopping. You saw increase in window opportunities. Now, still not enough opportunities for consumers to buy online, and many of them were having to wait 7 to 14 days. So there's definitely opportunities for the industry there to improve. And then on the back end, the fulfillment side. Since then, retailers have started working on micro-fulfillment pilots. They have started looking at how they're picking, whether they use a dark store, micro-fulfillment center, or they reshore up their third-party relationships. Additionally, though, there's some companies that have come up with technology that if the consumer chooses to opt in, it will at least make their curbside pickup more efficient, and allowing the store to know when they actually enter their parking lot through geolocation. And it will automatically send a text to the store that the consumer is in the parking lot. And as you can see here on the screen, park here, text this. So there's an opportunity to automate that process. But because of privacy, you also need to be very cautious and make sure your consumer's on the same page as you. But moving forward, the great majority of retailers, about 83% of them, added more staff to handle the online fulfillment, while 37% of them devoted more staff for delivery of online orders. So much of it was still human labor that was being utilized, and we'll see the technology advancements come to play in there. And then lastly on that part is the endless aisle, right? The digital shelf. And the big debate as to whether or not, there should be the same amount of items in a virtual environment as there are in a brick and mortar environment. I think with the introductions of marketplaces and the way consumers are interacting with those marketplaces, we're seeing that there's a possibility and an opportunity to extend that. And in fact, about a quarter of retailers during this time were actually offering more SKUs online than they were in store. So a lot of movement that was happening and continues to happen as retailers learn from the springtime frame in order to prepare for both the winter and then even post-COVID environment. For many, though, during COVID, out of stocks were a source of frustration. So sensors are big. They're not new. We've been working on various ways of running sensors. But before COVID, out of stocks accounted for over 129 billion in lost retail sales in North America and $1.1 trillion globally. So not only that, but out of stocks also actively drive customers into the arms of the competition. Many times they won't buy an alternate product, they'll just go buy it somewhere else. And an IHL study found that 24% of one online retailer's revenue actually comes from customers who experienced an out of stock at a local retailer. So definitely something that needs to be addressed there. And some of the technologies that I'm calling out here, focal systems over on the side here that's got the texting below. There's cameras throughout the store. These are being piloted in a number of retailers around the country, and it takes just-in-time shots, visual shots, cameras, and it drives that data into AI algorithms. At the back end, it's identifying what the potential losses are. Now, the really neat thing is that this company's created gamification out of it. And so a retailer who signs up to use this platform with them, they receive special handhelds from Zebra, and then their employees are assigned. So somebody's assigned to fill those holes, and it creates a competitive environment. How many did you fill? So you get recognition for that. And there's a leaderboard, so retailers are trying to have fun with this at the same time, trying to encourage, let's keep the shelf full, let's drive sales because it's for the health of the company. Other ways sensors are being used, and something new, inventory control, Zebra just announced. They have AI sensoring. Actually, it's visual learning, and you can hold your scanner in front of your shelves in the back room to take inventory, and you can actually check multiple packages rather than having to go through one case by one case by one case. And then, of course, virtual VR promotion, so you stand at the end of an aisle, and that just really drives some excitement for the consumers if they know about it. And that's been some of the challenges. How do you drive awareness around that for consumers to take advantage of it and actually enjoy that engagement? Another important digital advancement is quickly becoming smart packaging. And so, whether to address this through regulatory requirements or increasing transparency and communication with consumers, one thing that I think everyone can agree on is that the packaging is not getting any bigger, right? But the amount of information that consumers and regulators want shared is. And so industry will need to use the help of digital platforms and tech-enabled packaging to help share that information. So just as a heads up, as I go through the next few slides, for anybody that wants to pull out their iPhone, these QR codes are live. And so if you open your camera up and you hold your screen up to the QR code, you actually will be able to interact with the smart label environment. So if you're not aware of Smart Label, it's a tool here that's being used in the US and Canada, and it helps consumers to access more information about products that they use and consume that can ever be communicated on a package. That's really important. It's important for Smart Label users to go beyond the attributes that a consumer finds. Now, they're required as a basic minimum, but if a consumer is going to pull out their phone and they're going to scan and they're going to look for more information, they don't want to see the same things they see on the package. So, as of September, we're about 74,000 products. And one important note is that this is not a big database in the sky. Each brand owner owns their own data, and they either deliver it directly through an HTML or an API, or they have a third-party proxy that holds their data and then sends it to a Smart Label API wireframe. Really, Smart Label is a set of governances and a style guide, but it's important to have that because we want consumers, no matter where they're at, in whether they're the US or the Canada, no matter what state they're in, no matter what retailer they're at, no matter what aisle they're on, or no matter what product they're looking at, to have a consistent look and feel. And that look and feel is this. There's 5 tabs. It shares anything from ingredient information, ingredient definitions, and that's not a scientific definition, that's a consumer-facing definition. That's one of the things that we found was a big issue, is that consumers were turned off by those scientific definitions. They wanted to understand it in their language. It also talks about features and benefits, claims, what's good and bad about what's good about the product. And then the last tab is company brand and allergen. And allergen is really important. And there's a lot of work that's going to be going on in Smart Label to help bring that out, as much of the population has one allergy or another to food. Again, the QR codes are live. One of the new things that's happening is the introduction of an intermediary menu. Again, The QR code goes on the packaging, creating a living label. It becomes a smart packaging. You scan it, but instead of going directly to the smart label landing page, you now go to a menu. And you can see on this menu, it addresses bioengineered disclosure. The symbol at the top there for this use case on Frito shows the consumer exactly to the regulation specification. It's the first screen that they're supposed to see. But the buttons below are actually live buttons. The first one will always go to Smart Label. So if the consumer wants to get more information about Smart Label, they can. And then from there, it goes to brand, then to whatever really the brand owner wants to share. So brand information, anything around sustainability, and anything related to loyalty. What you can't do on this particular screen is you can't put the 2 for $5, buy one, get one free, anything like that. That does go against the regulation. So here's sort of what you see, and again in the PepsiCo sample, and we appreciate all the work that PepsiCo helped us with on this. But based on clicking on each one of those buttons, that's where the consumer can go to get more information. So it's really lighting up that packaging and giving the consumer the opportunity to access anything and everything they might want to know about it. Future work with Smart Label, though, is that we're looking to include recall information. So obviously extremely important. And the reason why this is so important is that this will allow it to communicate to a consumer who's already removed the product from the store. Right? So if you're in your kitchen and you hear about a recall, all you got to do is scan your Smart Label QR code, and it will pull this information up for you. And that's coming down the pike, and that's something new and neat for Smart Label. But QR code usage, there's been a lot of debate. Is it old technology? Is it not the right technology? Well, it is definitely a growing technology, and usage to activate packaging has continued to grow. And in general, COVID has been a boon for QR code usage. Restaurants are now using QR codes to access menus, to check in to receive orders. In grocery stores, we're using QR codes to start the scan and go process. So QR codes are really becoming somewhat ubiquitous in our lives. But it's not the only technology or symbology that's being used. As you can see here on this screen, and in this box of cereal, that's digital watermarking. So effectively, the UPC barcode is sort of hidden and buried inside of the packaging design and the ink. And it does two things. One, it allows the consumer to engage in it by simply pointing your mobile phone at it. But on an operations side, when it's going through the register, whether it's a full service or a self-service, it now is not, you're not going to have to fidget with the box, right, and turn it one way or the other. So smart packaging is becoming a big deal. You can also see on this slide is that, there's smart packaging for freshness, for ripeness. And so that's going to be significant in our continued battle to reduce food waste. And if touchless checkout wasn't important to consumers, it sure has become important as a result of COVID, as consumers look for ways to buy food with minimal touch, right? And retailers are responding by offering a variety of solutions. Take the shopping cart, originally introduced in 1937 at a Humpty Dumpty location by Sylvan Goodman. It changed in shape and size and material over the years, but today, look at them today, right? You can actually, it can manage your list, it can scan your products for you, it can help you check out. So shopping carts have come a long ways in being piloted. Some other active technologies that are being used by retailers, scan and go, right? Some 33% of stores represented in this year's research survey are providing an in-store scan and go technology for customers. And that's up from 26% just 1 year before. As well, mobile checkouts. Retailers are advancing the use of mobile checkout systems, which leverage either store or shopper-owned devices. So just having your mobile device, as you see in the picture here, you scan a QR code, you go in and you start loading up your items. Some 13% of retailers offer this, but 23% have plans to do so. So we'll continue to see that grow as well. And of course, mobile payments is probably one of the first ones out and what we know the most, but it really hadn't sort of grown across the industry. Well, today, almost 90% of stores now include this feature. You can argue that much of it was sort of driven because of the last 8 months and related to COVID. A lot of retailers sort of lit this up, and that's important to address that consumer fear. But consumers are becoming much more connected, right? So it's something that we've all got to plan for. You know, we have to ask ourselves, where are we at in this equation? But on average, a household on average has 11 connected devices in it. So just sit back now and think about, how many connected devices do you have? And are you above the average or below the average? But we also now just introduced 5G, and there's every expectation that that is only going to grow. I think the most important part of that, though, that we haven't really sort of thought about how it works within our industry, is that many of those are going to be voice activated. And there's a couple really good companies out there taking advantage of voice, but there's a great opportunity for the industry. You know, imagine having your own avatar that you interact with to support your daily activities, right? And it's just all voice driven. For some, voice assistants have become a way of life, right? For some people, it's just they voice text, they voice order, it just becomes a way of their life. But for others, not so much. Whether it's because they're intimidated or concerned about privacy, or flat out see it as an intrusion, adoption, you know, probably will be slow. But I also think COVID's going to have some influence on it as well. Yeah, I was in an elevator earlier today, and well, I sure wish I could have just said, please go to this floor, rather than actually having to touch a button, right? And how many other people are thinking that way? So where does that fit within the grocery store and within grocers shopping? So there's a group of academics and industry stakeholders that have come together to create what is known as the Open Voice Network. The Open Voice Network strives to make voice assistants worthy of user trust across multiple platforms, devices, and uses worldwide. OVN is leading a collaborative industry initiative to develop and propose global industry standards for voice development and administration. So, you know, the CIO council that I lead, we had the opportunity to go to MIT and really get under the skin on this thing, and have become a part of the Commerce Committee. And it's really interesting to think about voice in our lives and how it's potentially going to be used, but also what are the guardrails that are necessary for it. Right about now, we're sitting at about 4 billion voice assistant devices that are being used, but by 2023, we're going to be at 8 billion. You know, what world do we want when we get to 8 billion voice assistants? Do we want to have an open platform, or do we want to have proprietary platforms that, you know, as consumers, we're sharing our data with each, but more importantly, as practitioners, we're having to introduce our consumers and bring our consumers on those proprietary platforms? Or would we prefer an open platform that is governed and has a set of guidelines and that everybody can participate in? So, you know, why is this so important to all consumer-facing industries? One, it will be the easiest way for consumers to connect with you anytime, anywhere, from any digital device when all devices are digital. It will be the easiest way for retailers to listen to their customers, but without open voice, will it be privately? Instead of simply being a directional one-way conversation, when you talk to the internet, it will talk back to you. So imagine voice ordering your prepared meal from a grocer. And when you go back to order again, you start having a conversation with your voice avatar. How did you enjoy your meal? What did you like about it? And all of that data is being brought in to give you recommendations for your next order, right? So it's a two-way conversation, but there's a lot of work to be done, because the way, you know, I use pop, somebody else says soda, somebody else says Coke. We all mean the same thing, but we all mean something different. So, you know, there has to be a language dictionary that's going to be built. And that's going to take a lot of work and a lot of support from the industry. And again, you know, think about the data. Who claims it? Who controls it? Who extracts value from it? And we are starting to see more privacy laws come in state by state. So there's only an expectation that we will have a federal law and we'll deal with this as an industry. So again, a call to action by the Open Voice Network while there's still time. Build an open, interoperable, accessible, and data protected platform that all businesses and their customers can trust and use with comfort. So my last slide, and it's a little thinking out loud, is you know, we understand it's not possible for each retailer or manufacturer for that to invest in every technology. And boy, is there a list of technologies to invest in today. But it is important to consider which technologies deserve experimentation. I believe this is what food retailers are doing. And a good approach is to test and assess. This enables you to make relatively quick decisions before launching into major investments. And I'm betting that 2021 will be another important year in the industry ongoing progress with technology. So ask yourself, what is next and where do you fit in this journey? Ivan, back to you. Thank you.
Well, Doug, I wanted to ask you one question. With all of it, I know you talked a lot about what's coming up, but what do you think is going to be the most major innovative thing going on in 2021?
Yeah, I think all innovation is going to fall in basically two buckets. How do I better fulfill an e-commerce order? And how do I make the consumer's shopping trip to brick and mortar more efficient? And we think that touchless transactions at brick and mortar is going to be, you know, off the charts important. As a matter of fact, we've been doing a lot of webinars for our industry on those two topics. And, you know, they both, one is robotics, the other one's artificial intelligence, but they all are supported by technology and AI. So really, I'm sort of putting my bets in those two camps.
Well, thank you so much for today. And I know that the job that you do at FMI really helps out the food industry. And thank you so much for taking the time and presenting for us today. And also this presentation is going to be put up, I think tomorrow or the day after tomorrow on our website so everyone can see it. So thank you so much, Doug.
Thank you. Appreciate everybody. Be safe.